But first, fire at Ashley Youth Detention Centre following a disturbance crews at the scene. A fire was extinguished at Ashley Youth Detention Centre on Wednesday afternoon following what authorities called a disturbance. Tasmania Police and the Tasmania Fire Services were called to the scene at about 3:15, that's 3:15 in the afternoon, where they extinguished a small fire. Police said there were no reported injuries. However, they were communicating with two youths contained within an area of the facility. No other young people or staff were involved. What do you reckon? Should I read the news? Anyway, so what do I think of that? Gee, what do I think of that? I'm glad you probably didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Gee, I miss the good old days when families raised their kids instead
of... At Fiverr Pro, we don't promise perfect freelancers, but every developer is vetted through in-depth portfolio reviews. Not...
Sorry about that. We just had a bit of technical difficulty there with our services. We should be back online any... Yes, and away we go. Gee, I miss the good old days when family raised their kids instead of the state, when dads worked and mums were at home to greet their sons and daughters after school. Sons and daughters. Talk about their day, help with homework and reassure them that home is where the heart is and where moral discipline starts and ends. If the school had to administer discipline, it had to be warranted, but it was exact and purposeful. Everyone knew respect for elders was not optional, no matter the age. Old Mrs. Smith up the road would always be Mrs. Smith, even in our 50s. A badge was worn with honour, and the privilege, not authority, was understood, under the royal seal on the hat, hence why an officer was obliged to wear their hat when conducting police duties with the public. Most people only ever went to prison once, and they worked for their keep on the prison farm or a public service on a chain gang. Nobody wanted to do that twice. Police were respected because they were respectable and looked up to as pillars of society who set a good example and had the empathy and reasonability to know when discretionary privilege with a caution was the best option, weighing up the outcome of inevitable harm versus possible good. Such a shame all those rule of law abiding morals and ethics have been usurped by a bureaucratic revenue-based legislature, turning a perfectly good service into an enforced business model that relies on economic stimulus generated through infringement fabrication. What used to be everyday accepted life is now considered illegal, and what was not socially, publicly accepted is commonplace. Perhaps we brought this on ourselves by our complacency and acquiescence. The conveniences we allow to take over certainly do that. Take over. Would you not agree? Upon which this letter that I wrote today to the paper, I've done two today, woo, fits perfectly, and I actually wrote the letter first. Magna Carta 1215 is the keystone of English and Commonwealth liberty. In 1215, King John was forced to sign the Magna Carta Charter at Runnymede by the barons and the church, becoming the keystone of English Commonwealth liberty. This was brought about by King John's egotistically driven, dictatorial nature and trying to tyrannically overstep his boundaries of power over the church, the barons and the merchants. Merchants is the other word I'm looking for. Which are known today as we the people. He repudiated the charter, but never dissolved it. Repudiated meaning ignored. The people and... Sound familiar? The people and the church called upon France to overthrow John, but his very timely death averted the need. Sometimes people die at the right time. Now, there's your little history lesson on what is by any other name our Bill of Rights. The reason we don't know about it is because we aren't supposed to. We also aren't supposed to know that the 1901 Constitution of the Australian Commonwealth was never enshrined into law at Federation, thus making every legislation enacted from the 1st of the 1st, 1901, treason, subversion, usurpation, and at the least, unlawful. There is no such title as Queen or King of Australia, let alone a royal seal to enshrine the 1973 Australian Constitution into law. All we have is an occupying administration dictating legislature from a foreign territory. They are not our government, and they are not using our lawful constitution. Furthermore, Magna Carta 1215 still stands as the keystone of liberty, giving us the right to govern ourselves democratically, as we are the Commonwealth, the barons, merchants and church. Church is community, merchants are the importers, exporters of goods, and the barons are the traders. There's no law in Australia, only legislated administration. And that's a fact. There is no law. There is no lawful law. You can spell law in a few different ways. They all mean basically the same thing, basically. But they are different subheadings under what is righteous law, the law of the land, universal law. You have legislative law, you have common law, you have corporate law, you have universal law, God's law. You don't have to like the way that sounds. I don't care. I really don't care if you don't like the way that sounds, because it's God's law. What, are you afraid of the word God? Does that frighten you, does it? Maybe you got a problem. Are you afraid of God? Why are you afraid of God? What have you done? Everybody wants to enforce their atheism as if it's not a religion. Atheism trumps religion, does it? No, faith trumps religion. Atheism's just another religion. You need to get your panties out of the knot they're in and realise that. Law has nothing to do with religion. Faith does. The faith in knowing that there is a greater power to answer to at the end of the road. Just ask the African grey parrot. Even the African grey parrot knew that. The one that was actually had an owner that knew how to keep one. He was very old, and when he died he asked, "What's happening to me? And where am I going?" What a question from a parrot. We don't have any law in this country, I'm afraid to tell you, which is why everybody's so unruly. They're so unlawful. They're so angry with one another. Everybody wants to do the telling. Nobody wants to be told. Nobody wants to listen. And they're all self-righteous. Marvelling at their own stupidity. Anywho, 'tis what it is, and it 'twas what it 'twas, and 'twill be whatever 'twill be.